Welcome back, friends. Hope you got up and stretched your legs. We are super excited about our next session, which is focusing on our SEL bucket. And I am so proud and pleased to introduce Dr. Keisha Bryant. With over 2 decades of experience, Dr. Keisha Bryant has served as a middle and high school counselor in various educational settings, including traditional, magnet, and early college environments in Wake County Public Schools and in New Hanover County Schools. Dr. Bryant holds a license as a clinical mental health counselor and brings more than 15 years of experience in assisting students and families in K-12 and collegiate settings. Her extensive background encompasses a wide range of educational scenarios, including traditional, magnet, single gender, and early college programs. And now she's going to help us in our virtual school world. One of Dr. Bryant's notable strengths lies in her ability to design and facilitate professional learning experiences for diverse stakeholders. Her dedication extends to championing mental health support within underrepresented communities and advocating for intentional social emotional learning practices in educational settings. Again, we are just delighted to have you here. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, wonderful. I'm excited to be with you all this morning, and I bring you greetings from the state of North Carolina at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, where I serve on our SEL implementation team with CASEL, who is the governing organization for SEL learning. So today, what I will be doing is giving you an overview of social emotional learning and some sample practices that hopefully you will be able to utilize as you move forward in your school year. So to get us started, I want to know who's in the room. So if you will let me know who you are, what is your role, where are you representing as far as your region, your school, your district, and how long have you been in education? So as you know, I have 15 plus years. If I can be honest, I hit that 20-year mark a few years ago. So dating myself a little bit, but who's in the room? If you'll flood the chat and let me know who you are on this morning. And so as you continue to put who you are, I want to just give you what our focus will be for today and our time that we share together. So 3 guiding questions that's going to kind of take us through this presentation. The first one is, what is SEL? So when we talk about SEL, what exactly is that? And not only the what, but why does SEL matter? When we talk about that term and we throw SEL around, what is the why behind it? And with that, how can we utilize and promote SEL within our schools for our students? Before we get started, I want you to take a moment to do a check-in. So we're going to do some sample practices throughout this presentation, and there are things that you'll be able to lift and utilize in your classroom. So this first activity, before we get started, because we are here for SEL today, I want us to do what we call 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you will sit on the edge of your seat, if you're at a desk, if you're at a table, wherever you may be, whatever space you're in right now, and I want you to slowly take in 5 deep breaths. Roll your shoulders back. Put your finger on your belly button, as we would tell the kids, and breathe in slowly through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Let's do that 4 more times. Slowly through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. 3 times. Slowly through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Let's make these last 2 count. Slowly through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. And the last one, slowly through your nose. And a big exhale through your mouth. Next, I want you to think about and look around your space. Where are you? So look around your surroundings, your virtual setting. Some of us have filters, but in your real reality, what are 4 things that you can see, or what are 4 things that you notice? You take the time to take in around you. Is it a piece of art? Is it a post-it note on your table? Would it be your fingernails? Is it a plant? Is it the coffee cup? But what are 4 things that you see and notice in your space? 4 things. On this third thing, I want you to put it in the chat. What are 3 things that you are grateful for? It's October, fall season. What are 3 things you're grateful for at this point of the year? If you'll put 3 things in the chat that you're grateful for. My faith, my family, my future. Beautiful colors, yes. Colder weather. Ability to engage in this work. My health, yes. So we have a lot of commonality: faith and family, health, being here, cooler weather, health. We have some things that are lifting here. The rain, it rained here this morning in the part of the state that I'm in. Yeah, so 3 things that you're grateful for. 2 things I want you to do. What are 2 positive self-talk statements that you can say to yourself? So we're educators. The year has started. For some of you all, first quarter has almost come to an end, depending on the start of your school year. If you're traditional school, if you're modified, you may have already finished with 4. But what are positive things that you can say to yourself as an educator? 2 things. I can do hard things and I can ask for help. Yes, love that. I can do hard things and I can ask for help. And lastly, what is one thing that you are looking forward to today? It is Thursday, 10 o'clock-ish. The day is not finished. So what is one thing that you're looking for on this Thursday? Rainy Thursday where I am. With him, all things are possible. Yes, it is. Okay, LaShonda. I refill my personal cup. I can only be enough for you all are still doing the 2 positive stuff. You like that one. I am doing everything I can for students, and what I do is enough. I enjoy it. So that's an open activity. When we talk about SEL, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, there are a lot of ways that you can use that activity as we go throughout today, but that is a great example of a mindful check-in. Some people utilize it by using the 5 senses. What are 5 things that you can smell, 4 things that you see, 3 things that you can taste, to give you an example. And so I appreciate you all participating in that activity. So what is it that you hope for your students? I want you to think about that. Flood the chat. But what do you hope for your students that you are engaging with in your schools or in your districts? Think about that as we go throughout this presentation. What is one thing that you hope for your students? So why SEL? All learning is social, and learning is emotional. Do you agree? That's the statement that I give you. All learning is social, and all learning is emotional. Put in the chat whether you agree, disagree, somewhat. All learning is social. All learning is emotional. Not necessarily. All right. Very good. Any other thoughts to add to Leah? So all learning is social. All learning is emotional. I'm not sure it is, but could be. I appreciate that, Kelly. All learning is social and all learning is emotional. Anyone else would like to give a concluding thought on that? Agree somewhat, maybe most. So I like that. have a large spectrum here. Some agree, some don't, and some not so much. Reaction to learning is emotional. I appreciate that perspective. Thank you, Sean. And so when we say that, this is what we say when we talk about learning being social and learning being emotional. The thought behind that is decades of research have demonstrated the following: that SEL, social and emotional learning, it improves students' social and emotional skills, attitudes, relationships, academic performance, and perception of classroom and school climate. So when we say that all learning is social and all learning is emotional, there's a concept called you have to Maslow before you can bloom. I'm not sure if you've, but it intertwines Maslow's hierarchy of needs and blooms. And so with the concept that we're talking about, making sure that we take care of students' psychological and psychosocial safety and physical safety needs before we jump right to the academic needs. So trying to show the connection that learning is also social and emotional. They're not isolated things. Because if we can take care and help students improve in their social and emotional intelligence, their attitudes, their relationships, then it will impact the academic performance of the whole child, bridging non-academics with just regular academics. And then that way we have healthier and safer school climates and cultures. In addition to that, there's the hope that there will be a decline in students' anxiety, behavior problems, and things like substance abuse, and where we'll be able to see the long-term impact and improvements of student skills, pro-social behaviors, and their academic performance in their academic engagement. Social emotional learning is also, it elevates educational equity. So it is something that is for all students. It is something that is relevant in all schools. It is something that everyone can be a part of. And so it is inclusive for all students. It's inclusive for community. It is inclusive for the families and stakeholders that we serve in our buildings. It uplifts student voice and gives student involvement, and not just the adult voice. But with social emotional learning, students are active participants, in their educational process. Their families are active participants in their educational process. We involve our community partnerships, and it makes sure that we serve ourselves as the adults and not just have the student learner and the student only in mind. And so that is the why. So what is it? So I've yet to define what is social emotional learning. That's the why. We've done an activity, but what exactly is this concept of social emotional learning that we throw around, SEL and that buzzword that we hear so much in our districts, that we hear so much, and that has been elevated more and more since we've been coming out of a pandemic. It's become more prevalent. We are looking for ways to service the whole child. But what exactly is it that we're talking about integrating in our schools? A quick definition that we live from Castle is that social emotional learning is an integral part. It is something that is a process for young people and adults. It helps to develop the skills, the attitudes. It helps us to manage our emotions, helps us to have great emotional well-being and emotional intelligence, to hopefully build stronger relationships and help us to be caring and responsible adults. It strengthens those school, community, and family partnerships, helps us to have collaborative and great cultures that also tie into curriculum and instruction in our buildings. So it's not in isolation from the academic priorities that we have. The way we look at social emotional learning is to be inclusive and to be collaborative and to be a part of what is already happening in our schools. And so CASEL, we have 5 areas of social emotional learning, but something that's very important that we like to live. When we think about SEL, when we hear SEL, a lot of times we think of it from the student lens, but SEL is not just about supporting the students. SEL is making sure that you as the adult, as the educator as well, And so throughout this presentation, we're going to reflect as educators, not just about our students, but about ourselves as well when we talk about doing this work and facilitating our work in the classrooms, but making sure that we start with ourselves and make sure that we're doing okay. And so with that, there are three things that I want to emphasize when we talk about SEL and educator well-being. It's very important that you be a reflective practitioner. If you work in the state of North Carolina, you work in public schools, and you're evaluated by your evaluation tool, Standard 5 is about reflective practice. And so we are charged to do it just in our evaluation process. Someone tells us that we need to take time to pause and to reflect, not just on what we do, but what we want you to reflect on. And what I want to encourage you to do is to do regular self-reflection and check-ins with how are you doing? How is your emotional well-being? As a frontline first responder, you are with students, you are with colleagues, but we come into the buildings, how are you showing up for yourself? How are you doing as an educator? It's October. And so I want to encourage you to be a reflective practitioner. Do your own check-ins. Do you need mental health days? Do you need to pause? Where do you need, what is your mind-body connection saying when we talk about well-being? How are you managing your own emotions? How's your patience? The next thing is be a boundary setter. So when we talk about emotional well-being and educator well-being and social emotional learning, is making sure that you set boundaries and have that work-life balance. So protect your personal time away from work and establish healthy boundaries in the workplace. Now, this may sound like foreign, but we have to make sure that our people on the front lines are well too. And so SEL, there's an adult wellness component to that. And we always like to start out to make sure that you are doing okay yourselves. And the last thing is making sure that you're a collaborative supporter. And so part of being able to do this work with SEL is speaking with your colleagues to identify who in the building can be my partner, can help me to balance this responsibility, who can help me plan for the work as we engage in SEL together, but who also is my circle of support, whether that is in the professional workplace, whether that's at the district level, at another school. We're in a virtual community. This is a virtual institute. And sometimes when it's virtual, it can become very lonely. So who are you collaborating with in the virtual world? Who is your support system when you think about your own educator well-being? So Castle, when we talk about an overview of social emotional learning, social emotional wellness in our schools, it is based on 5 broad areas. And as you can see with this wheel, it goes out what we do in the classroom, what we do school-wide, then that extends to our family and caregiver partnerships, and also our community partnerships. It is based on 5 competencies and areas: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. When we talk about self-awareness and what that entails as the first principle or first competency, it is the ability to understand what are your emotions? How do you feel? Being in touch with what's happening with yourself. And so that can be the ability to name your emotion, the ability to have a growth mindset. What is your purpose? And so when we look at a reflective of that, what I want you to think about are some statements below. I use self-reflection to understand the factors that control or contribute to my emotions and how my emotions impact me. I recognize and reflect on ways in which my identity is shaped by other people, my race, my culture, my experiences, my environments. So my lived experiences. Because remember, SEL is inclusive for all. And I believe I will continue to learn and develop skills to better support all young people to succeed. So my question to you as we pause, what comes to mind when you read these statements? When we talk about self-awareness, you as an educator, what comes to mind? If you put it in the chat. Prioritizing impact over my intentions, always a good reflection, sometimes hard. Very good. Thank you, Amy. What comes to mind? So self-awareness as an educator, how well are you doing with your emotional, being able to check and regulate your own emotions? Learning new skills to better support we don't focus enough on ourselves. Very good. Someone strongly agree with that. Got an exclamation point. Self-reflection gets lost among all the other hats we wear. I appreciate that honesty, John. Very true. And so what would this look like? So the first competency is self-awareness. So we have to be aware and do our own check-ins with our emotions in order to be able to help students to be able to check in with their emotions. And so a classroom example of this, so we opened up with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But when we look at a classroom example, whether it is elementary, middle, or high school, is simply, or even as colleagues, because what I want, everything that we do today is starting with us, and then how do we transfer that into the classroom or into our school? And so this is a simple way that you can do a check-in, rating 1 to 5. And so if you use this activity, when we look at it as a classroom example, this is a way that you can help students to identify how they are doing each day. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1, not so well, 5, doing great. As a class, you could determine what that looks like, or what the terminology, what phrases you would want. That would be including your students in the process. As an educator, you could set it, but you also could do it with colleagues, school-wide. Let's have a 1 to 5 rating as part of our culture. You walk in the building and someone could say, how are you doing today? They give a 1, how are you doing today? 5, how are you doing today? 3. What it does is it gives you a quick glimpse of how someone's starting their day. How are they coming into a space? Gives you an idea of maybe how you need to check in. In a classroom, students could write it on a sticky note. They could do it. You could pan the audience and have everyone raise their hand. But you would understand, it gives you as an educator and as a colleague a thermometer check. It also helps students to be able to voice how they're doing. And if students are able to do so, if a student or a colleague comes into a setting and we know that they're on a level 1, then that might help us if they're maybe reacting in class in the morning. Maybe they're exhibiting some difficult behaviors, but we don't understand why if we haven't assessed. But if we have assessed it, maybe we can give some more grace, or we can connect with student services professionals. We could connect with administration. We could send them to a separate area to have time to kind of evaluate their feelings. It might help us to better handle that student. We could pull that student to the side and show empathy. There are a lot of different things that could happen if we know on the front end how one another are doing in our culture. And so this would be an example of how we could give a quick glimpse of self-awareness as a competency, and reflecting and dealing with our emotional and building that emotional capacity in ourselves and in our students and in our school culture. Next competency is self-management. So we are able to identify our emotions, but are we able to regulate and manage our emotions? One thing to know how you feel. I feel angry. It's a different thing to be able to manage that anger. And sometimes as adults and or students, we struggle in that area. Sometimes we don't know how to effectively manage our emotions, our thoughts. our behaviors, and they can cause us to end up in places that we desire not to be. And so this includes being able to manage stress, to feel motivation, to feel collective accomplishment and goals. It helps us to be able to de-escalate situations that could go wrong in friendships, that could go wrong when it comes to conflict resolution, misunderstandings with colleagues, with staff, administrator to teacher, administrator to school counselor, social worker, or whoever. So the ability to manage our emotions, the ability to create a culture to be able to safely go through and feel our emotions, and identify ways to cope with those things in our school climate and in our school settings. So the reflective piece here, when we talk about being a reflective practitioner as educators, these would be the statements that I would ask you to ponder in this space. I can calm myself when I feel stressed or nervous. As an educator, think about a difficult moment. I can calm myself when I feel stressed or nervous. How does nervousness and stress impact you as the teacher, as the district leader, as a director, as the school counselor, and whoever else we have in this virtual space? How do you do? Before we think about the students, how are you doing with that? I take action to impact change on issues that are important to me in the larger community. And so advocacy, when you are passionate about something, how do you handle that? When you need to communicate something that you don't disagree with from a staff meeting, how do you handle that? When you're preparing for a difficult parent-teacher conference, how do you handle that? If there's change or you want to lead change in your school community, but there's not strong staff buy-in, how do you handle that? And going back to the boundary setter, I balance my work and life personal renewal time. So what comes to mind when you read these statements? So we've talked about self-awareness. Now we're talking about self-management. How are you doing as an educator? Stress, mind-body connection. We know students sometimes go to the office because they have a belly ache, a tummy ache, headache, to maybe avoid getting out of doing a task. Do those same things show up with you as an educator? Do you have migraines or headaches when you come to work? What is your body saying to you? How are you without that coffee? Thank you for your honesty. So please put in the chat, how are you doing as we pause here? What comes to mind when you read these statements? Someone strongly agree with you. Very good. So that work-life balance. So when we talk about self-management, how do you manage your emotions? What are you doing so you can identify that you're feeling stressed, but what are you doing to manage that stress? Without coffee, you don't want to see it. I appreciate that, John. I made a goal to focus a long time ago because I realized I would not survive as a teacher without that. I appreciate that, Lisa. Thank you. And continue to share. Someone said they want to do better with their work-life personal balance. And so renewal time. And so how do we put this with students? How do we help them to manage their emotions? And so an example in a classroom, and these are just simple examples. What we've tried to do is to give you things that could be at any level. And so we call it a peace area. And so what that simply is in your classroom, you explain a place or you create a place or a place in your school building. So some schools have what they call calm rooms. They've been able to establish a place where students and staff can go to detach, to take a time out if they're upset. And so, as the instructor, as the school, you would set the criteria around this peace area. So, whether there's a calm room in a classroom or whether it's a designated room in your building, and you would talk about what is the purpose, what is it for? So, it's for calming down, but it's the goal to be able to integrate back into the classroom, to be able to get back into the workspace. But you may need 5, 10 minutes, you may need 15 minutes, 20 minutes. If you go to places like Google and Saks and Lenovo, they have gaming areas, they have these common areas at these big corporations. And what we are finding is that educational organizations are beginning to try to pattern themselves because there's been some connection to work and product effectiveness and producing in their workers when you're able to provide a space where your staff can regroup and can renew. Same concept when we think about our students. Sometimes our students come into the room self-aware. They get out the car, something has happened the night before, something has happened on the school bus ride, there may have been conflict, something has happened on the hallway walk to the class. And if they're able to be self-aware and identify their emotions, then we want to provide a space where they can go and be able to handle their emotions. And so being able to, if they're not ready to engage in class and they're being difficult that morning, are there places that they can go and gather themselves and have a timeout, but be able to come back into the classroom setting and continue with their instructional day? So that would be what are ideas of how we do this virtually. So you could set up breakout rooms. You could allow a student to, you could have a breakout room that would be called the peace breakout room. And then you would set criteria around acceptance into those breakout rooms. So a student can chat you individually that they need to take a moment. A student could chat you and say that they need to take 5 minutes off the camera. If you require the camera to be open, hey, I need to close my camera for 5 minutes. Is that okay? I think most just don't log on when they are struggling. They could turn the camera off for a few moments. So those would be ways when we talk about a virtual setting. I'm glad you asked that. And so when we talk about virtual spaces, you could do breakout rooms. You could open up and allow different check-in moments in like break points in your instructional lesson time for them to be able to, if they need decompressing moments, if they need to take breaks. You could embed that in your instructional time, some 5-minute pause breaks to be able to have that that time virtually. Same thing like you did today, where you had 5 minutes and then you do your countdown. I like the way Amy said, you have 2 minutes, and when we start back in 2 minutes, it's a hard start. I forgot the terminology that she used, but those are something that you could pattern and be able to do as in your virtual space as well. Good question. So the next competency that is important or that we want to share as part of that 5 is social awareness. So it's not just about ourselves, but we also have to take in awareness of what's happening around us. And so social awareness is the ability to understand perspectives and empathize with others that come from diverse backgrounds. So remember, we opened up that SEL is a lever for equity. So it's inclusive of all communities, all families, all partnerships. It is school-wide. So when we think about it, it's school, family, community partnership. When we think of SEL, it is for all. So everyone has a voice, the student, the teacher, the student services people, the principal, the mother, the father, the guardian, the community boys and girls club, the YMCA. It is full scope when we look at social awareness, but the ability to take in others' perspectives. And so SEL helps us to understand others, who's different from us, and why don't we understand why Amy responds the way she does? How do I build capacity to have that understanding that she constantly has outbursts in class? How do I build capacity? I'm sorry, Amy. How do I build capacity to understand that Keisha may cry sometimes and doesn't understand why she's crying? How do I build capacity to ask, Julie, are you okay? What's wrong? Do you need help with anything? How do I build capacity to understand that Jacqueline may have to leave to go out to observe an observance like Ramadan? And I don't understand why Jacqueline is leaving the classroom, but I need to be respectful of that. And so social awareness builds understanding and capacity for things that are different from us, but it shows empathy, it shows strengths in others, it shows concern for others, and understanding the influences of our organization over our culture. And so as an educator, what I would like you to reflect on are these statements. Pay attention to how others are feeling and recognize how my words and behavior impact them. So pay attention to how others are feeling and recognize how my words and behavior may impact them. Colleagues and students, because our words have power. And my behavior, how's it impacting them? I'm having a bad day. If no one knows, when we go back to the first one, self-awareness, if no one knows because we don't have a check-in system, then me rolling my eyes or me not speaking might impact a seventh grader, might impact my colleague. I ask others about their experience and perspective before offering my own version of events. So I want to hear about others' perspectives. And I appreciate and honor cultural differences within my school community workplace. So this is Hispanic heritage on the tail end of it would be an example. So we talk about, September 15th, I think through October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month. But are we aware of other different things, other cultural differences when we are planning in the workplace, when we're planning events, food choices? Understanding. So observances. How is that going in our virtual spaces, in our school spaces? The different activities that we ask students to engage in and plan and to do. Are we inclusive for all? So what comes to mind when you read this statement? Impact over into, I like that. Listen. Because everyone has a perspective. Student voice, your voice. Anything else come to mind? Listen to understand and not to respond. Thank you. I appreciate that, John. Someone agrees. They loved it. And so when we talk about social awareness, an example of this, of how we could build community in our schools and in our classroom, would be able to use something like restorative circles. Simple practice provides a safe culture and environment. And so an overview of that is the way circles work is it involves a talking piece. Excuse me. And so that could be a stuffed animal, that could be a pencil, it could be a plant, it could be whatever you deem to be the talking piece. I'm sorry. Then the circle, if you've been trained as a restorative circles person, but it's a practice that you can use, you set norms for the circle. And that's something that builds community, that your circle, which would be if you're in a class and you use circle as an ongoing practice, your class would set those norms. What would be the values that would be important to your circle? The important thing to note with circle practices is that it's not coerced. So participants may pass. So if there's a prompt on the floor, if you're asking a question, students are not forced. Or if you're an adult, if you do it at a staff meeting, no one is forced to give a response. That builds the safety. That builds the pressure of not having, if you don't want to speak, you're not pressured to speak. But if you want to speak, only the person with the talking piece is the one that can speak. Other people can't respond, other people can't ask questions. It allows for everyone, people who normally maybe would not talk, for their voices to be heard. It makes us listen to understand, as John talked about, and not to respond. So, some examples of how you could use this in a classroom setting would be, what makes a group feel like a community? So we talk about social awareness. What makes it feel like a community? Have you been in a class that felt like community? What was that like? What was it? What was something that you appreciated about? What if it didn't feel that way? And then what's something that each individual can contribute? So when we talk about perspective and bringing in different differences and cultural differences and just understanding what would make that a sense of community in the classroom. This also could be extended school wide. When you look at circle practice, you can use it for parent nights. You could use it as staff meetings. You could use it with parent groups to build a community. So it could be used in a variety of ways, but it is an example to bring social awareness in a safe and positive way. Then we get to relationship skills. So we are able to identify our emotions, talk about self-management. So self-awareness, self-management. Then there's social awareness, being aware of others. But how do we build positive relationships as adults, adult to student, adult to families that we work with, adults in leadership, peer to peer? How do we build these positive relationships that include active listening, being able to clearly communicate, to work together when we talk about collaborative partnerships and spaces, being able to practice conflict resolution in a healthy way, showing leadership in groups, and offering support? That was one of the things that we talked about for SEL and educator wellness, is making sure that you are a collaborative supporter. So how do you build those collaborative partnerships with communication? And how do we role model that for our students? So the reflective piece here that I would like for you to think about are these statements as the educator and as the adult. I stay focused when listening to others, and carefully consider their meaning. I try to get to know people around me. I openly admit my mistakes to myself and others and work to make things right. Mm. So I stay focused when listening to others. I carefully consider their meaning, because sometimes it takes a different level of understanding. We wonder why people are acting the way they are, doing what they do. But do we stay focused? Do we listen to understand and not respond? I try to get to know people around me. Beyond, we're in a virtual space. So, what are the opportunities that you're able to come together virtually? So, how do you get to know people around you in your virtual space? How are you doing that with your students? How do the students have a chance to get to know you if it's a virtual space, or to know each other? And are you creating virtual cultures, and are you creating virtual schools that openly allow people to fail forward, but the opportunity to rapidly recover from those mistakes? Do students feel like they can make a mistake, or if they don't do well on an assessment, do they feel that all is not lost? Are there opportunities for them to rebound, to fail forward? And is that something that you display before them? That sometimes you don't always get it right. Maybe a student came to you because they felt like a test that they got to answer correct, and maybe they challenge or want to appeal. And maybe perhaps in this one case, the equation, you solved it wrong as the adult. Do students feel like they have voice to be able to come to you, and you're able to acknowledge that mistake, which opens up them being able to know that it's okay to make a mistake? So are there opportunities to fail forward? When students make behavior or discipline issues, are there opportunities to fail forward and to learn? Are we having those discussions afterwards of what could be done differently? Admitting my ownership and role in the mistake is important. I go first and helps create success. I appreciate that. Vulnerability, very good. That's hard. And so an activity that you could use here is what we call pair listening. Pair listening, something that you can use K-12. But pair listening is you have a table mate, turn your chairs face to each other, and for 2 minutes, we work on our listening skills. A person can talk about any topic, and the goal is you cannot interrupt. Relatability. As you are listening to your partner, are there things that they're talking about that you can relate to? And you keep a tally of that. When the timer stops, you switch roles and you become the talker and they listen. And as much as you may have the urge to want to add or ask questions or interject, you don't. You just listen. And you just let that person talk freely. Afterwards, you would just debrief on what that felt like. What did it feel like to share? Because it's not always comfortable to share, but also what did it feel like to listen and to be listened to with no interruptions? And lastly, responsible decision making. When we talk about an overview, the fifth competency of CASEL is responsible decision making. So social emotional learning is the ability to make caring and constructive choices about our personal behavior. And so building capacity for students and ourselves to be able to identify solutions to problems, to be able to recognize critical thinking on both sides, to understand one's role and take ownership for the greater good of well-being in the community, for ourselves, in our schools. So the reflective statement that I would like to take you to here would be, for what I want you to think about would be, I involve those who are impacted to explore a problem collaboratively before choosing a solution. So leaders, if I have any leaders in here, principals, directors, do you just choose a solution or do you involve who the solution is going to impact? When possible, because there are times when you just have to make a decision. There's room and understanding for that. But when voice is able to be received, do you provide those opportunities? I consider my choices, how my choices will be viewed through the lens of young people I support and the community around them. And lastly, I take time for self-reflection and group reflection on progress toward goals and the process used. So what comes to mind when you see these statements? Transparency as much as I can. Appreciate that. And for the sake of time, I'm going to move forward to our example. There's something called a decision tree that helps to with something that you could do individually with students, but also in your class in a staff meeting to talk about decisions and to help people process decisions. So it's like a flow chart. So whatever the issue is, it could be attendance is what we're going to use as an example here, but what would be the consequences of class being the overarching thing, and then how would attendance impact that? So if I make the decision to attend class, there's one arm on the decision tree. If I make the attendance to not attend class, and then from that, what would be the continued consequences? If I attend, then these are the positive. If I don't attend, then these would be the consequences over here. And it opens up a visual for students and or staff to be able to look at and visually see how their choices are being impacted for the greater cause that you are trying to talk about. And so some key takeaways that's very important is that SEL can happen anywhere, classrooms, families, communities, anywhere. School-wide, ideally. It also, in a classroom, it's important that it's a supportive classroom environment. You want to integrate SEL in your instruction. So this is not something that you do outside of your instruction, but what are ways when you think about content areas that you're planning, if you are doing something and reading a passage, are there things that you could lift from the passage that would hit on any of these different 5 competencies that would already be in a lesson that you're doing? So whether it is on friendship, whether it's on responsible decision making, self-awareness, are there any cultural texts that you're teaching? Are there any things that talk about conflict resolution? Are there any things that talk about how a character in the story and that analysis, there's an analysis of how they feel that you could use as an opportunity to integrate SEL in what you're already doing. So this is not something to do outside of, but it makes sure that it's embedded in what you're already doing. In schools, it's important to foster supportive school climates, adopt ways that you can integrate SEL into student support. So we talked about an example would be a peace area. So is that something in a virtual setting that you could do? Is that something that you could do in regards to discipline policies that help with SEL? So restorative practices is an alternative to like a suspension. So that would be something that you would be able to use. And now, what are ways that you can elevate school student voice as part of your school-wide initiatives that you're doing? And so what it looks like, I want you to think about with your virtual setting, what does it look like in your classroom now? Where are you? Where would you like it to go? What is it looking like in your school practices and policies? What is it looking like when you gather as adults virtually for staff meetings, for planning, for teacher work days? And what does it look like in relation to your families that you serve and community partners? And these are just 10 indicators when SEL is done school-wide. It involves all these varying components because it's school, family, and community. So as you can see, you have supportive discipline, you have a continuum of integrated services, authentic family partnerships. It's integrated in the academic instruction. Youth are a part of it, student voice, supportive schools and classroom climates. There's a focus on you. So adults, and what we've tried to really embed in this process, it's not just about the students, but full scope, it involves the educator as well. And align community practices and then systems of continuous improvement. So my parting question to you, how would your school feel, look, and sound if SEL was a part of the things that you do virtually? How would it look, feel, and sound? So I want you to think about that. You don't have to put that in the chat. But as you move forward, what would that look like? How would that feel in a utopia type setting? If it was integrated already in the things that you're doing, or could be integrated as you move forward. And I've hit on this already. In the classroom, it's a supportive environment. It's integrated in already existing instruction. And then there are times where you have explicit SEL instruction. So it's like a 3-legged chair. And I'm going to try to open up the last 5 minutes for questions, for comments. We started out with this being an overview, but I wanted to open up if you have questions that maybe I could answer, or if you have comments about what you've heard today. Feel free to put it in the chat.
I want to say I appreciate how you prioritized the adults kind of regulating themselves first and reflecting on themselves first before we try to put it out to the kids and the strategies that we can use ourselves and then we can use in the classroom. But I think, I mean, I was just obviously I should like look at myself right before I start trying to roll this out to the kids. But that reminder, because we surely don't take the time to do that for ourselves. And I think would just be so much more impactful if we could prioritize that, and not because it's selfish, but because it helps us do the mission. So I just, that was just so impactful to me, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing that. I saw self-care. I saw someone say that sometimes they don't slow down long enough to reflect. Any other questions or comments? What I meant to do was to put a resources page, but I will email that to the planning people to add that you all will be able to have access to with this presentation as well. You are so welcome. So welcome. Thank you all.
We really appreciate you being here. And I already texted Kania Epps and said, thank you so much for the recommendation.
You are
So
so welcome.
we appreciate your expertise and the time that you took to put this together for us and to share. We do have on page 9 of your participant guide a 5D independent reflection if people are feeling reflective, as I am after this presentation. And if anybody has anything else for Dr. Bryant, we'll give her a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
And I believe that, as we're feeling calm and peaceful and ready to move forward, we're going to have a short 15-minute break for you to work on your reflection, for you to talk to your teams, to get up and stretch your legs. And Dr. Bryant, we've had several people ask, like, do I have these slides? Do I have these slides? So I think they
Yes.
want to carry it forward. And we will be sharing those with y'all. And so thank you again. And we hope to be working with you, collaborating with you more in the future.
Thank you. And I hope everyone has a great remaining of your day. Enjoy.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.